Hey everyone, my name is Jason. I'm a solo game developer living in Sweden, and this is the fourth time that I've recorded this video. The first three times, my mic was muted. Let's get on with it. Going to be talking a little bit about level design and environment art today. I have actually made a devlog once before that touched a little bit on level design and environment art. I'll put it in a link up here if you wish to check it out. It's from a while ago. But one thing that, the first thing that I want to talk about actually is something that I discussed in that video, and that was whether or not I want to go with a big map or a many smaller segmented levels, basically. And so if you didn't know, my game is a top-down 2D pixel art game that takes place in a city with like buildings and things like that. And that's what we're working with here, okay? So initially I had planned to go with one big map and just to follow that thread to see where that gets me. And yeah, it was pretty interesting, but I've now switched gears and I want to go for smaller segmented maps instead. And there's four main reasons for that. And I want to share with you those for, in case you're interested, you know? So the first thing is that because my game will take place in a city, there will be different districts in the city. And those districts are kind of important that I want to convey. And so I think that having each district be its own level gives the district freedom to look and feel however it wants to. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I don't have to think so much about the transitions between different districts, essentially. And when I say transitions, I don't mean like fading black and white or screen transition. I mean the actual spatial transitions between those two areas. And so, for example, I can show you what I mean by that. So this is the old big map level design. And we can sort of see in the top left here that there's these kind of like high-rise areas, basically. And then this is like some park. And here's some like maybe like markets or something here. And so by the transitions, and this is like an industrial like warehouses or something. And by transitions, I'm talking about like, how do we get from this space into this space? And how do we convert this aesthetic into this aesthetic? You know what I mean? If I just have the different level segments as different the different districts as different levels, then I don't need to worry about that so much because we can just fade out and load in and we're in a new district. The next thing is that I think that loading and like having a transition screen, even if it's just fading black to black and then fading back in, actually implies distance traveled, right? So if you're in one district with one area and one vibe, you hit like a loading screen, it fades out, fades in, you're in a completely different area. It kind of feels like your character traveled some distance and it implies that the city is bigger than it really is. Now, if you look at this full big map that I was going for, this was never going to be the entire city anyway. But it would only ever have been like, you know, the whole game would have only ever been in this area. But now it doesn't have to feel that way anymore. It can be that when we go to the high-rise district, maybe that's really far away somewhere else, right? And it just makes the whole city and the scale of the game feel larger than it is without actually having to create something so large. And I think that that's a big win, especially as someone who's a solo game developer. And then the last point that I really like is about these level segments is that no matter how much I change the map, and that's something that I've noticed as well, we're going to see soon, that there's a lot of changes to the map that I've made. These changes won't ever impact other levels. Well, largely they shouldn't. Whether there's an aesthetic change or a spatial change, it's not going to encroach into something else. Again, as an example, if we wanted to change this here, it would have to encroach out this direction or maybe up here into this, which means this would have to change. You know what I mean? So I don't have to worry about that anymore because each of the districts will be their own contained thing. There's very, very few situations that I can think of where any change in a district will impact the change in another district. So I think that's a win as well. Now, having said that, I think that there was a lot of benefits going with the big map to begin with. The first was to sort of test the limits of this sort of medium, so top-down pixel art, city-based game. The main issue being obscuring the character, being a huge issue. So again, if we take a look at the map again, this high-rise section just simply doesn't work. You can't see anything. Now, of course, we could obscure the buildings that you're in front of, and I've already made features that do that, but I just don't like that being, you know, what carries the level. And I think that there's probably just more interesting solutions that can convey what big high-rise buildings need to convey without requiring that kind of stuff. actually. And then the other thing that I liked about it was that it helped a lot with me creating a lot of like, you know, ramps and stairs to get to different areas and overlapping pathways and things like that. And then creating a robust system that does that in 2D, by the way. I don't use any 3D for this. And to resolve all that. And I do have a robust system that handles that and have had that for a while now. And the new level doesn't actually require that anymore, but the game will require it at some point. And it's nice to know that that's been taken care of. So even though the big map was not where we went in the end, you know, we've learned stuff along the way, lessons that will help us moving forward, which is great. Now, a lot of people actually in the video that I talked about before, in the comments, had left lots of really, really good thoughts and suggestions and takes in the comments. And actually, a lot of things that I've learned here were echoed by people in the comments long before as well. So that was really interesting too. So again, thanks everyone for all of your contributions in the comments. All right, so the next part that I want to show you is actually just going to be the old level in Godot, which I've already showed you, but then compare it to the new level, okay? So this is the old one. We've seen this. And the new one looks like this. Here we are. Looks largely the same. It's because there's a couple defining features, right? So we can see that there's this big highway thing here with a tunnel at the back. There's a transit center is still here. This park is still here. Karaoke is still here. That's important. See, karaoke. But yeah, it largely kind of looks the same. So, you know, this park has moved in to here, for example. The aquarium is gone, for example. So that will probably be in its own district. Whatever this district was is gone. High rise is gone as well. You can see that stuff's not there anymore either. But a couple things that we'll notice. First of all, we've still got all these colorful blocks everywhere, which kind of implies a city, but it doesn't really feel like a city. Another thing is that this still looks like a lot of space, and it's a little bit concerning. If this is just one of many districts, am I not creating so much more work for myself? I mean, potentially, we'll have to sort of see how that tape plays out. But one thing I think to note here is that not all of this is a playable area, actually, and a lot of it is fairly constrained. And I can demonstrate that to you now. So I've blacked out the non-playable areas, and the stuff that you can still see highlighted is largely the stuff where you play. Yeah, so as you can see, there's actually not that much. And if I jump in the game, if I turn that off, and if I just jump into the level right now, you'll also see that when you take the camera and how zoomed in into account, it's actually, you don't see that much. So all of that excess stuff on the outside, you're not going to see too much of. But the reason it's there, right? But the reason it's there is because there's a chance that in cutscenes that there might be camera pans and things like that. I have to see how that works out in the future, but I'm just making allowances for the possibility of seeing more of the city that is not in the player's, you know, where the player can actually play. And that's kind of why those spaces are kind of set up in some way. But I won't have to dress them until I know that I have to dress them, basically. The other thing that I want to point out real quick is just look at it, see how this feels. First of all, I kind of like how these paths kind of lead me where to go, kind of thing. That's one thing that I really like. There's a couple other leading things that I do like about this. But one thing that I don't really like is that, okay, no collision here. But one thing I don't really like is that these blocks don't feel like buildings. I don't get the city feel from these blocks. They're just big colorful blocks. They suggest, you know, that there'll be a building there, and that's all well and good. But it's really not selling me on the city feel. So this is something that I actually really wanted to solve as well. So we have now a new level. It's blocked out, literally. But one thing that I need to know is I need to know, how does it feel if it looked more like a city and had some of that aesthetic? Does it come across? You know, are there any issues that I run into? You know, if the buildings are no longer just blocks, no longer just cubes, but they actually were buildings, what does that do? What does that mean? Is there any additional work or other considerations to take into account? So the next step was I wanted to find a way to rapidly prototype environment art on these buildings, just so I can get a city feel. So the first thing that I did in order to accomplish that was I wanted to create some modular buildings. Now these buildings are, and that's these ones here. I can hide this level, I think, here. And these are the modular buildings that I made. And these are not necessarily the final, well, they're probably not the final art. They're not even necessarily going to be the art direction that I'm going for. The whole point of these, so like this like one down here, is that I can very easily copy, paste them, make them bigger, make them shorter, make them taller, whatever, right? So like if we take this building up the top, for example, you know, we can make it wider very easily. So I just, boom, now it's a bit wider. We can make it taller. You know, this kind of thing. Ignore that. We'll just copy paste and fix that, you know? But you know what I mean? It's this kind of thing. And then if we wanted to like vary up the windows a little bit, we could take one of these, put that up here instead. Take one of these ones, bring it up the top here instead, maybe. You know, just to add some variation. And then like now we have a new kind of building, you know? And all the other buildings are sort of the same. And this is like a more corporate-y building. There's some flower planters at the front. This is more of like a apartment building. And this is like a side of a building or something. So I wanted to create these little modular buildings that have different aesthetics that I could pepper around the city to make it feel more like a city. So after that, the next thing that I needed to do in order to do that was that I needed to somehow get all of this blocking out of the level into Aseprite, but I needed to do it in a way where the resolution was still correct so that I could paint directly over it so that I know whatever I make, I don't have to rescale or do any shenanigans. It's a one-to-one representation of the level, and whatever art I create will fit in the level. So what I did was I created a tool. So right here in this little box here, level screenshot export, I can now turn on this little area. And this is the snapshot area, and I can sort of just define what I want to create a snapshot of. Its height, its width, all that kind of stuff. And then when I'm ready, I can hide the snapshot area and then click this snapshot button. Boop. And it has taken a snapshot and exported a PNG of the level. And that's what that looks like here. And so now that I have the PNG from this level, I can start, you know, creating new layers and, you know, painting over it and doing whatever I need to do, essentially, right? And so this is what I've done. So using the modular buildings that I've created, I have created this, and it looks kind of like this. I think it looks really cool, and there's like other billboards back here. You know, I think it's starting to look and feel a bit more like a city. The transit center has a very unique design to it, for better or worse. But, you know, it's kind of there. Right? So there's some buildings. Now, we can sort of still see that there's still a lot of like blocked out buildings that don't have buildings there yet. And I just haven't dressed those ones yet. But largely those ones are probably or mostly going to be outside of the play zone, and that can be seen. Maybe not all of them. We'll sort of see. But for the moment, this is what I have. So in order to continue prototyping, what I'll need to do next is I need to bring it into the game. And it's very easy to do. I can just hide the background. Right? Export this as a PNG, and then go over to Godot and add a sprite, grab the export, plop it in, position it into the right spots. So we can just use the cafe as a guide here. There we are. Now the ordering isn't right. You can see that it's underneath some of these blocks. So we go to ordering up the Dragon Ball Z index. Here we are. So now it's a bit higher. There we go. Looking good. And now we can run the game with all the art in place, right? So that was nice and quick. We can see what it looks like. Now, it's not going to work perfectly because obviously this is just a skin slapped on top of everything. So we can see that our character is underneath the skin, right? We've just slapped everything on top. But for the purpose of just seeing, well, what does it look like when I'm... that was a technical difficulty. Ignore that. Okay, let's go back. All right, so just... that was a spoiler. Yeah. So the purpose here is just to sort of see, well, what does it look like, you know, if we move around this? Does it feel more like a city? And I think it definitely does. So, you know, at the end, if I'm happy with the way things look, I can then start chopping up the buildings and putting them in place, fixing up the ordering of everything, make sure everything looks fine, and then it will be okay. But I think this looks pretty cool, you know? It definitely has much more of a city vibe up here with all these buildings, you know? With little alleyways here. I think it looks really cool. Yeah. And as for the size of the area, you know, not sure if it feels too big or too small, if it's just right just yet. But I think, you know, with more people in here, with a little bit more direction, you know, I think I might need to know where is it that I'm trying to get to first, you know. If I knew that where I needed to get to was 2 or 3 screens away, maybe this feels too big. Maybe there needs to be some other solutions to that, but we'll sort of see. Right now, we don't have that context. We just have this, but I think it looks really good. Definitely feels much more like a city. Yeah, and it's a pretty quick way to prototype. If I make any changes, re-export the image and then just import it again, and good to go. Yeah. Now I don't know if the art direction is what I want to go for. I'm not sure if this is the right vibe that I want to go for, but you know, it's just I need some kind of city vibe, and I think that this is at least accomplishing it for now. Also, I'm not that great at environment art. This is like the best I can do. So we're gonna have to level up in some way in the future. But you know what? That's future Jace's problem. The important thing is that we get this level design bottleneck out the way so that I can get other stuff going too. Now, there's a couple other things that I wanted to just point out real quick that were important key things in the workflow. The first was having a floor height indicator was important. Okay, so this is my little floor height indicator here. And this is like my definition of a floor height, right? This is about how tall one floor is in a building. And so most buildings adhere to this, not all. Because not every building has to have the same floor height, but as long as they're roughly in the same ballpark, I think that's what's important. And that's kind of what we sort of see if we measure it around. Like this is, I don't know actually about this one. This is not 2 floors. This is maybe just like 1 floor with a high ceiling, and maybe that's okay. This one here, it's a bit better. Yeah, so it's like a four-story building. Yeah. So that floor height thing, pretty useful. The other thing you might be wondering is also, how did I get this exported to a PNG that I could draw on in Aseprite that with the correct resolution? That thing you might wonder, right? So just remembering that I have this tool here that I use. So you might be wondering, how did you do that? How did you get that to work? And I can explain that really quickly for anyone out there who's interested in how to do this. So just note, I have a screenshot flag here. So when I click that, it happens, right? And the way that this works is when it's on, what I do is I create a subview, a sub-viewport, and I add it to the scene as a child of the root node, because this script here is the root node of the entire scene. And then I reparent it so that the sub-view becomes the root of everything. So everything in the scene becomes a child of this new sub-viewport, right? And then what I do is I have to reposition everything to be in the positive quadrant of the sub-viewport. So I take the bounding box of what we want to take a screenshot of, and I use that to move everything down by that size down into the positive quadrant. And the reason for this is because for whatever reason, the sub-viewport only renders that quadrant. Well, I guess it sort of makes sense, because if it's a viewport, 0, 0 will be top left, and it will only render what's within the viewport. So I move everything down into that quadrant. Then after that, I save it, and then afterwards I move everything back to where it was before, and then I reparent the old root node to be the root node, and then I get rid of the sub viewport. So that's how that works. The actual saving is this one line here, where we take the sub viewport, we get the texture that it's rendering, we get an image out of that, and then we save it as a PNG, and that's basically how you do it. So it's not super hard. If all of your stuff is always in the positive quadrant, you don't need to do that weird shifting stuff, but my stuff wasn't, and I don't really want that constraint. So this kind of ends up working for me pretty well. Okay, so that is it, folks. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover. So I really wanted to get a lot more done, to be completely honest. There have been some IRL adulting stuff that I had to tend to, which took some time, but also these environment art and level design are things that I am not good at. I struggle with it. I'm inexperienced. And the other thing is I don't like doing them. Unfortunately, maybe because I'm inexperienced, maybe because I'm not good at it, but I don't enjoy the process. Writing, programming, character art, these things I really enjoy sitting down and steeping in, but environment art and level design, I just don't. And so it's really hard to get myself up and running and working on it, which is a bummer. So I wish I got more of this stuff done sooner. I know I could have, but it's just hard for me to do. But it was important nonetheless. It was a bottleneck. I needed to get this stuff out the way so that I can get other things going. And on the plus side, if we focus on the positives here, I think things worked out really, really well. One, the bottleneck is out of the way and I can work on other things. Two, we answered a bunch of questions about actually that level's design, which is really nice. I have something semi-concrete actually in terms of its layout. It may stay that way or something close to that. That's really cool. I've got something to work from at least, which is really, really great. And not only that, but with the environment art, even though I don't think it's the final art or the proper whatever, and I'm not satisfied with the art, it definitely conveys the city feeling, and that is what I wanted to achieve. So that while I play the game and I'm soaking up the game as I build it, it does have some degree of feeling of a city instead of these weird random colored boxes. So in that regard, it's a big win on those fronts, and I'm proud of myself for getting through that. And at the end of the day, also, like, you know, it's not that we can love every part of everything we do, right? So some jobs have parts that you don't like, and it could be that I end up liking these stuff as I get better at them. But even if I don't, it's not the worst in the world. You just kind of got to do it, and that's fine. But I think that I learned a bunch of lessons today, and hopefully it'll make things easier next time. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for watching this far. If you have any advice, by the way, for level design or resources to check out, leave it in the comments below. I may pick up something from that. I may not. We'll see. But I look forward to doing anything else right now. It's going to be quest stuff. I can't share quest stuff, unfortunately. But there are other things that I've done, other progress that I've made that I can share, and I look forward to making some videos about that. Also some other devloggy videos that might not show progress, but dev related. I'm doing this, okay? Thank you everyone for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and I'll catch you next time. Take care. Bye. Fourth time's the charm. Goddamn.